Hello everyone, thanks for joining us at Warrior Chat. We have a very, very important topic today as we talk about what does good instruction look like in the classroom. And I'm telling you, we had three of the greatest experts possible here to discuss that. So thanks for being with us. First of all, I want to introduce our panel that we'll have this discussion with today. Dr. Sandra Lamond, who's our Assistant Superintendent here at Southern York County School District. Mrs. Beth Kuntz, who's the building principal at Friendship Elementary School, and also Dr. Robert Bryson, who is the building principal at Susquehannock High School. You know this, good instruction doesn't happen by accident. It takes good plans, it takes a very well-trained staff, and then it takes follow-up and so forth. And certainly I don't know all the ins and outs, so that's what we're going to learn today about what is good instruction, how do you get there. So first, Dr. Lamond, again, it doesn't happen by accident.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about the process of what this administrative team went through to determine what should good instruction look like in the classroom.
Well, we certainly know that the number one connection to what encourages student or what secures student achievement is the quality instruction in the classroom each and every day. We have instructional leaders, all of our principals, assistant principals, our curriculum director, Dr. Atkins, as well as our special education director, Mr. Rogers, too. We meet on a monthly basis, and we knew that there were certain elements of quality instruction that needed to occur in each and every teaching and learning experience that our teachers actually put forth within each lesson. So collectively, on a monthly basis, we meet and talk about those. But 2 years ago now, and I'll actually let Mrs. Kuntz and Dr. Bryson share too, we began a process to ensure that we were looking for those exact same qualities in every single classroom from kindergarten through 12th grade to ensure that there was a true systemic focus of quality instruction.
Okay, very good. Well, let's start with number one. Mrs. Kuntz, what is the first very important thing that has to happen for quality instruction?
Well, it was one we agreed with very quickly, and that was it's all about relationships. You have to have that relationships with your students and that passion to be able to get involved, know about them as learners, as individuals. And when you build that rapport and when you build that relationship, then you're going to have that better chance of getting quality instruction out there for them to benefit their learning.
Well, I ask both of you, first from an elementary perspective, then from a secondary perspective, what does that look like? How do you teach that? How do you evaluate it? How do you measure it?
I think it just begins with the teacher showing that they care, that they're there for the students, they want to get to know them as individuals, what are their likes, what are they interested in, and then where you can incorporate that into their learning. Sometimes it's just the easy thing at the elementary level, greeting them at the door. You're asking them how their day went, what did they do on the weekends. I think our teachers go above and beyond that. You'll see them at their different sporting events,
Right.
I've gotten invitations to children's birthday parties, and that's always special when they think they want
Right.
you to be there. But I think it's just being involved and letting them know you care about them as individuals.
Does that look differently, Dr. Bryson, at the secondary level?
I really think it's probably identical at the secondary level in that, teachers are greeting students as they come in, saying good morning, asking them about a sporting event, whether it be girls basketball that just took place over the weekend, or how the theater's coming along with Bye Bye Birdie or something of that nature. But I don't think it looks much different than what adults look like when they're establishing the relationship with each other. I think throughout society, that's an important quality that our employers are looking for, is the ability to have conversations, to establish a relationship that eventually maybe the student's marketing a product. And at Susquehannock or an elementary school or middle school, you're really selling the product of an education. So I don't know that building a relationship looks a whole lot different.
Very interesting. We'll get to number two in just a second. But how do you communicate that to the teachers in the classroom that we've decided, number one, relationships are very critical to success, and then what kind of follow-up takes place?
Absolutely. Well, the wonderful thing is when you look at relationships, it really is the Southern way. It's creating an environment, which we have here within the entire district, where we all care about each other. We care about each other's well-being, and in the classroom, with teachers, with students, as soon as students know that their teachers care about them, they're willing to take risks. They're willing to do their best. They want to do their best. They know that their teachers believe in them. This was the easiest one for us to be able to put forth as an expectation in front of our teachers, because we didn't have to teach our folks how to do it.
Yeah.
They just naturally do it. We are very fortunate to have the caliber of teachers that we have. They had relationships from the beginning, and it's a feeling that you get when you walk into those classrooms.
Yeah, nobody asked, but I'll give you my perspective anyway. You're right. It's our culture. It's what our folks do. But that starts with leadership. And again, this is just my perspective. But it starts with the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, the building principals, modeling that kind of behavior when you develop relationships, not only with staff members, not only with parents and other stakeholders, but also with the children. And again, my experience is that our leadership does a great job at that, is modeling that kind of behavior. So interesting point, yeah.
And it's genuine. It's a
It is.
students first philosophy across the board, and it's one that we all believe. That's why we're here every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 2, Dr. Bryson, the second critical element of successful instruction.
I think number 2 is probably a little more difficult to see in the classroom. It's data-driven, which means whatever instruction is happening in the classroom, there's a reason and there's some type of data that would indicate that a student or a class needs that instruction. So it might be in the form of a benchmark assessment. It might be in the form of something informal like an exit ticket, where the students write an answer to a question as they walk out the door, so that our staff has an idea of what those students need when they come back in the door the next day. So I think, again, you'll see that K through 12, you'll see more of that. And then it's also sharing those results with the students so that they feel part of that process of, here's where my areas of strength and weaknesses are, and there's a purpose behind the instruction that I'm getting. It's not just because Dr. McCullough thinks I need that today.
Right. Dr. Lamont, the thing that I just find amazing about the use of data in the classroom is not so it determines the overall lesson that all students hear or learn that day. It really is to individualize the instruction that the children receive.
It is, and that's actually the third element that we look for in terms of essential components of instruction, and it's differentiation. And I'll actually let Mrs. Kuntz elaborate on that even more so, but as Dr. Bryson said, using data to drive instruction is not only for an entire class of learners, but also what do individual students need within that class, so that we're enriching students or we're making sure we provide the support as well.
Okay, well, before we get to differentiation then, and you mentioned it, Dr. Bryson, the collection of data is not just a one-time start of the school year, let's do an assessment with a benchmark test or whatever. Maybe talk a little bit about how often, what that looks like throughout the school year, Mrs. Kuntz.
Well, it's daily. Okay. You're gathering data daily from every lesson. You want to make sure the students have achieved the skill that you're teaching, the objective that you're teaching that day. You want to go back each time and make sure that they've held on to that skill. But you're basically gathering, sometimes it's informal, as you were sharing, Dr. Bryson, and an exit slip. Sometimes, as in the kindergarten level, it's observation of what children are doing. That's teachers' observation of what they're able to do. But it really is on a daily basis. And you have some of those throughout the year that are bigger benchmark and data given, as in the benchmarks and assessments and things. And even our PSSAs that come up give us another piece of data. But it's important that it's not just one source, that it's multiple sources and it's on a daily basis.
Oh, very good.
And to add to that as well, our teachers are so diagnostic in nature. They have reached such a level of quality instruction that not only are they doing it on a daily basis, but even throughout a lesson, teachers will be using a formative assessment to say, are they getting this or are they not getting this, or this group of students are still struggling, or this group of students gets this and they need to be challenged. So we see teachers right during the middle of an entire, just a lesson, a 50-minute time, making changes in order to meet the needs of the learner.
Yeah, one final thought here, because we probably could spend a whole Warrior Chat on just each component, obviously, of effective instruction. But the other thing I find amazing, just from a parent standpoint, how education has changed is not only to determine what they need to learn and what needs to be focused on, but even how the child is being taught. You know, I mean, children learn differently, obviously. Do you want to talk about that, Dr. Bryson?
Sure. I think there was always the quote that Rumpelstiltskin woke up 150 years later. The one thing he would find that was the same was the education, and I think we're at the point now where that's really changing. In that, if you come into our classrooms, more than likely you're going to see a dynamic environment where students are engaged in their education and they're not simply being delivered a message or delivered information, which now they have access to 24/7 on the internet. So the next part of our essential components of instruction is engagement, and I think that's really where public education, but education in general, and our understanding of how the brain works and the brain research is out there is, the more active we are in our education, the more we discuss, the more that we problem solve together as a team, the more likely we are going to affect a larger population, because all students learn a little bit differently, and we've got to accommodate those needs as an instructional staff.
Okay, so make sure I got it. We're up to 4 so far, and we'll break it down a little bit more. But relationships,
Yes.
data-driven education, differentiation, we talked about, and now I heard you mention engagement also. Talk about, Mrs. Kuntz, what does differentiation look like at the elementary level, please?
Well, it can look different in every room for each student. Differentiation is really where you're using that data that you've been gathering and then basing your instruction on what the students need. And you may have 3 students who are ready to take off on a skill, and their activity may be totally independent that they'll be working on. You may have others that still need the guidance in small group from the teacher. Others will be working in collaboration with students on a skill, what they can do. Maybe delving in deeper to the topic, enriching on that, and then just getting some basic remediation. So again, it's basically what the students need. If they need something that's more hands-on, then they get that more hands-on. If they need to be up and moving about to be working, it all goes in so much together. It's hard to sort of tell them apart, because really the data is what drives your differentiation in getting the students engaged and making it authentic.
Dr. Bryson, you mentioned engagement. Now talk about what strategies teachers use to engage students in the classroom, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a large number of strategies that our teachers are using. One thing you would see probably most common would be students working together collaboratively. Students being presented a problem that they're required to solve. One which may be a little bit too challenging for one individual, but when you put 4 or 5 together, they're more likely to reach a level of success that would meet our expectation. In addition to that, you might also see a teacher chunking activities so that they're working on something for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're moving to something different for 5 or 10 minutes, right. Really increasing the level of activity within that room over the course of a 50-minute period of time. I don't want to avoid either direct instruction. You're still going to see some direct instruction. There's still a need for that. There's more direct instruction maybe on a one-on-one basis or a 5-on-1 basis versus a 1 teacher to 25, 30 students basis. But you're even going to see some of that direct instruction or whole class instruction as well. It might be a debate. It might be viewing a short video clip. There's a multitude of things that you would witness walking through.
And really, to add to that, as Dr. Bryson said, in the past you would go in and you would see the teacher doing all the talking, or the teacher
right.
doing all the teaching, and the students just sitting and taking in that information. We now say we want minds-on and hands-on for kids, all of our students, to really be immersed in that learning process. And that involves being able to communicate with each other, to talk about it, to demonstrate it, to relate it to a sports analogy. You certainly would not want your team of players to just be sitting on the bench and listening to the coach. They've got to get out there and become immersed and involved and actually in the practice with each other.
A great analogy, because I'm sitting here thinking, I'm not a teacher, I'm not an educator, but a coach, former coach. And that's what we did on the practice floor. You're exactly right. First of all, every person learned differently. Some you could draw it on the board, but the other you had to actually get them out and walk through it to show them. And the word you used, I thought was a good one, Bob, chunking it out. Because that's how you teach skills in athletics also. You just break it down as far as you can to get them to understand each skill and then slowly start building it together. So it's interesting. The same thing happens successfully, I think, for coaches too. So,
and we've also learned too by watching our students, watching our learners, is that students also learn it at a different rate and a different pace.
Yeah, true.
And so teachers need to adapt the rate at which students are able to learn information.
Part of the differentiation, obviously.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have 4 of them. The final and 5th element, I can't wait, of effective instruction. Mrs. Coons?
Evidence of student learning. And really it comes back to the whole cycle again, but you have to make sure everything that you've done, do you have the evidence that the students have truly grasped it, that they're able to apply it in a new way on that skill, and when you have that, then you know they have it down. But then, and it starts all over again.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Dr. Bryson, I imagine in a classroom there's some of each. There's some evidence, there's some lack of evidence perhaps, and what does that look like, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, I think it goes right back to what Mrs. Kuhn said, is it's kind of the circle of life, so to speak, in the classroom. And that is, okay, now you have your evidence, which provides you the data to make the decision on how you're going to differentiate instruction the next day, or what engaging activities, tasks you're going to incorporate for them to meet that expectation based on the evidence that you've collected. So I really do think it's just a circle in which each day they're continuing that process. Maybe something that fits in there as well is evidence also may look like authentic evidence. It may be a project. It may be oral dialogue that happened within the classroom. But there's got to be something that we're pulling from the students that would make us do the next step. So
interesting. The one thing I've heard you say many times, and then I'll let you do it, but I'm always fascinated about it, is that our goal is for every child to have a year of learning for a year. So when you hear Dr. Bryson talk about evidence, obviously evidence for one child is going to look different than evidence for another child.
Absolutely, but the end result is there has to be that evidence. That students have learned and make that growth over time. They've learned a year's worth of learning in each year. I think the other point as well too that we haven't touched upon as much, once just identifying the 5 elements, is the amount of training and professional development that our administrators went through to actually take a look at and identify, as Beth said initially, what are those quality different components that do ensure that good teaching and learning happens in every single lesson. And we spent a good year really researching and fully putting our hands around each of these different areas and what do they look like, and as instructional leaders, what are we looking for in the classrooms in each of those areas. And then huge kudos to all of our administrators. Then there was professional development sessions where they actually broke down each of the elements and shared what those looked like and examples of those in multiple ways to each of the teachers, to all of the teachers at all of the grade levels as well. So the expectation is very, very clear among all of our teachers that these are the things that we are not only looking for when we go into a classroom to ensure quality learning is occurring, but they have an understanding, or teachers have an understanding of why they're important, because they do make sense.
Right. When the dust settles and the day is done, how do we measure that these 5 essential elements of instruction really are spot on and are working effectively in the classroom? Mrs. Coons?
It all comes back to the students. Are they being successful? Because if their success is our success, if they're able to convey meaning of what the skills we're trying to teach them to be able to pursue the careers that they want to pursue, then we've hit the mark with what we're doing.
Good. Dr. Bryson?
yeah, that was the one thing I was thinking of as we were talking, and that's a real shift in the mindset of what you're looking at. In the past, you may have looked at the teacher and said, well, the teacher didn't do this or did this or what have you, but really that shift is now on the student to say, what was the student doing? What was the student able to do? What kind of discussions did the students have? Because that's really the product. And given the 5 essential components, one might be missing, but if the students performed at a high rate, that's really at the end of the day what we're looking for. So it's still being a person and being able to pass judgment on what are the students doing and what can they do and what have they shown.
And monitoring that as well too. Dr. McCullough, I will share with you that all of our administrators monitoring instruction and being those instructional leaders means being in the classrooms each and every day, and that is their priority every single day, to be in the classrooms and be seeing the teaching, observing the teaching and learning process that happens on a regular basis, and then being able, as Dr. Bryson just said, to be able to have those conversations and provide that dialogue and feedback with the classroom teachers as well. I know certainly Dr. Hensley and I are in classrooms 2 and 3 times a week. He's in one of our buildings right now with administrators looking at and providing feedback to the teaching and learning process.
Yeah, the conversation did come full circle to develop a relationship with students, and then each student being successful is the final way to monitor and evaluate our success. And you said it, Dr. Mon, it really is the Southern Way culture, which has to infuse itself in every one of those aspects of effective instruction.
Ties right back to our mission, really,
True.
when you look at it, that every student, all students will reach their potential, and that potential is different, so instruction needs to be differentiated on a regular basis to ensure that learning happens for all students.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this discussion as we talk about essential elements of instruction. And I tell you, there is absolutely not 3 better educators, 3 more outstanding educators than the 3 folks we have with us right now, Dr. Lamont, Dr. Bryson, Mrs. Kuntz. And you folks, you're very unique. And you are. First of all, you're just great educators, number 1. But number 2, you live the Southern Way, which is a culture for children, to make sure everyone is important and every child is cared for. That is the Southern Way, and these folks live it every day. I say this often, and maybe you get tired of hearing me say it, but we have a unique culture here at Southern York County School District. But even in addition to that, we have a unique community that values education and their engagement in education with the children. So, I'd say our community, all of you help so much in that culture of the Southern Way, where the children are important, and everything we do is just to make sure students are successful inside and outside the classroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you leave here one thing, or a couple things maybe, leave with that you're an important role in that also. That we just have outstanding people here every day leading instruction. We're very, very fortunate for that. So thank you so much. Again, if you ever have any questions on this subject, please contact Dr. Lamont's office.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure she'd be more than happy to talk hours about effective instruction, which is great. So for Mr. Tim Hare's video production class, who's doing our videotaping and pushing all the right buttons for Mr. Tim Hare, our video production teacher, for Mr. Mark Rill, our coordinator of marketing and public information, I'm Wayne McCullough saying, I'll see you next time.